You're good to go.
All right, let's call to order the Planning Commission meeting on 8 May 2024. It is 6:03. Commissioner reports. I don't have anything this week. Bill, Don?
I don't have anything.
Nothing.
Okay, then we'll move on to staff reports.
Heather, did you have a staff report?
We're just working on some additional open houses for the US2 project. We've gone ahead and started looking at June, July, and early August events. So we'll be posting out information, but we are pursuing looking at the Airway Heights Days for public engagement on the project, and potentially the 4th of July event. And we're also going to be asking Fairchild if we can go out during the open house, which is their air show day too. So there'll be bound to be a lot of opportunity to engage the public for the US2 project there. We also are working on a scope for our grant application to the Department of Commerce for the grant funding for the 2026 comprehensive plan. Zach and I will be working on deliverables, proposed timeline and schedule so that we can submit that to the Department of Commerce for our grant. And we also will be likely next month going out for requests for proposals to hire a consulting firm to assist us in coordination of the comprehensive plan update. So we're looking tentatively at a kickoff date around the beginning of July for the 2026 comprehensive plan. And of course, we'll be giving you updates along the way on the other 2 portions of the plan that are underway, one of which is tonight. Zach's going to talk about where we are with the missing middle housing. And we'll start talking about the climate portion and the greenhouse gas emission portion over the coming months. And just along those lines, we did have the contract approved with SSG, which is Sustainable Solutions Group, for doing the climate grant work over the next 2 years. They were able to bring their budget to our budget, and they were also able to modify their budget to include more opportunities for local in-person events by increasing the budget for Sage Step consulting firm out of Wenatchee, as well as that they have a really clear understanding based on our conversation that they have to do all of their own studies, research, and data collection other than what we have available in our GIS portal that they're expected to come up with the data. So a win for Bill right there. Those are all the updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, just 2 quick things. One, we did authorize funds for our mural project through the Public Arts Commission on Monday. So we will be soliciting for a new art project in downtown Airway Heights, probably toward the end of next week or the following. We're hoping to have that project and the mural installed and having everything completed by the end of the summer. We do have 2 separate businesses who have reached out, being willing to engage in that process and offering a wall up. So we're really excited about both options. A site will be selected at the Arts Commission meeting on Monday next week. Secondly, about an hour ago, we did receive an email from Commissioner Dove announcing his resignation from the Planning Commission. So just wanted to say we really appreciate his time and effort in the Planning Commission. We wish him the best. And moving forward, we will begin recruitment. We did have 2 applicants for the last Planning Commission seat. We will run an opening and try and get additional applicants, but I will reach out to Mrs. Kern, who was an applicant for the seat last time, to see if she is still interested. And if she is, we will also include her within our applicants list. So that's it.
Thank you, Zach. We'll do our roll call. Commissioner Ponce is excused tonight. I'm present. Commissioner Jones is arriving shortly. Commissioner Campbell.
Present.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Present.
Commissioner Davis is excused tonight, and Commissioner Dove is resigned as of this meeting. Making a motion on our agenda for tonight.
Mark, I would actually, let's do a motion to excuse or not excuse, the two commissioners who are not present.
Thanks, Zach. I apologize for that. It's gonna take me a minute to get used to that, just based
It's
on
okay.
how we've done it.
It's best for the minute. So,
All right, well, can I get a motion to excuse Commissioner Pons and Commissioner Davis for tonight?
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you, Zach.
Sure.
All right, now can I get a motion for our agenda?
Mark, and I just wanted to make a quick note, since Andre is no longer on the commission, we now, for a quorum, we do require 3 instead of 4, so technically we do have a quorum right now, but I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. And then, a motion for our meeting minutes on the 10th of April.
I move that we approve the minutes from the 10 April meeting as published.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you, guys. Sorry about missing last month. I got wrapped up with work, so I apologize for that.
They left me in command, you know.
I heard you did amazing, so Zach said I need to be out more often.
Oh, he did not see it. I'm thinking.
I talk a lot, I'm sorry. Alrighty.
All right, do we have anybody in here for public comment tonight?
There are no members of the public on site or virtual at this time.
All right, well then let's move on to our presentations. Let's hear what STA has to tell us about their strategic plan update.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'll try to hurry up so you can get to the public records request training.
Take your time.
But I'll try to keep it to 10 minutes and then maybe 5 minutes for questions, conversation, further discussion.
Brenda just, or not Brenda,
Does it?
what?
Pleasant.
Just call that. I'm sure we wait for her.
Sure.
Please, yeah, just saw it.
Oh, good eyes.
Just talk generally, but my name is Brian Jennings. I'm the Deputy Director for Community Development. Former student of Heather's when I was in grad school. I like to throw that out to give her a hard time.
That's effective.
Yeah.
Hello. Use it wherever you like. All right.
So,
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Sure. I just wanted to chat a bit about, we've been doing this at planning commissions all around the county. Next week we have City of Cheney, but we've been to Liberty Lake, City of Spokane, Spokane Valley, Spokane County as well. So we asked and were offered an opportunity to come speak. So we're here today to talk about our strategic plan. So we are nearing the end of a plan we adopted in 2016, and that was combined with a request for funding to the public for 0.2% on sales tax. And that's essentially, as we wrap this up here in 2026, 2027, we are going through this public process of identifying what initiatives for transit we should look at investing in over the next decade. So that's really what the basis of this strategic plan is. Go ahead. So phase 1, which was the foundation, the goals, we reworked our mission statement and our vision statement. You'll see the mission statement here in a second. but we reworked our goals and some higher level strategies. That was adopted in December 2022 by our board, of which Hank Beinecker is a member of our board from Airway Heights. He's your representative. In July of 2023, we kicked off the second phase. And now we're, approaching a year in July. We do hope to wrap it up. Our goal is to wrap it up in December of this next year. I think we're on track for doing that. Sorry, not this next year, this year. So there's a lot of outreach, and this is part of that outreach that we've been doing all along, but now starting to ramp up because we're really trying to focus on, in this phase of it, essentially the initiatives that we're going to be pursuing and getting feedback from the public on that. And that was part of the open house we held comically at the meeting room, your library, Spokane County Public Library. I swear I was led to believe it was much larger than it is. As Heather will attest, it's very small. We didn't know. Still, it was good networking for everybody who attended.
Well, for future reference, the space is available to STA. Free
And
charge.
she had offered that, and I probably should have taken her up on it, but this is a great invitation, so that's great to know. Obviously, yeah. Go ahead, the next slide. So this is a rework of our vision, very brief. I like it because it's simple, connecting everyone, connecting people to opportunity. Go ahead. These are the goals. First goal, elevate the customer experience. Goal 2, lead and collaborate with community partners to enhance the quality of life in our region. And goal 3, strengthen our capacity to anticipate and respond to the demands of the region. Now that can simply be just essentially really looking at our network and seeing where there are needs within the community for bus service. Example I like to throw out though is with the fire in the Medical Lake area just last year. We were asked to utilize some of our buses to actually get out there and help transport people out of there effectively. And so I think that's really key as to how, in a very rare occurrence, we just certainly don't hope that that's the case in the future, but us responding to the needs of the community in a very unique manner. So beyond just basic day-to-day transit. Right? So for phase 2, we had a number of questions we're seeking to answer. What are the projects, the programs, the investments that we need to make to deliver on those phase 1 goals? How should our service, our modes, and the network evolve? And making sure that the new investments align with the funding. So right now, if you make a purchase in your community, you're in the PTBA, which is a taxing district within our area. 0.2% goes to fund transit. So even though you may not be paying at the meter box, you still are helping fund transit in the region. So how do we align those investments with that funding? And just note that funding will sunset in 2027. We have to go back to the voters to renew it. That was part of the deal we made. We said, listen, we're asking for this funding. We're promising we will deliver on these projects over the next decade. And to basically guarantee that, we will put a sunsetting clause on this and go back to the public to renew that. So, and then finally, what will be required in terms of resources, facilities. We're updating our facilities master plan concurrently with this process as well. And what will all of that mean in terms of delivering on the overall strategic plan? Go ahead. Phase 2 of this project schedule, we're in Q2 of 2024, so you can see what's ahead of us. The dark blue on the bottom is the substantial public engagement from now throughout the summer into the fall, and then Q4. You see the green bar second from the bottom, board action on the final plan. So right now, we're coming up with this initiative list. We have a workshop with our board on June 6th, where we'll be getting their input. We'll get their input in advance of that, but basically talking about how we're going to evaluate all these different initiatives that we've gathered up for the past year. So, go ahead. The funding and investment principles, these were adopted by the board. It was in February, maybe March. But the first one, ensure that STA, this is important, can deliver and maintain those improvements since 2016. So basically what we said we would do, the funding principle is we need to maintain that and not go back. Second is leverage our current financial position to deliver one-time investments, not ongoing. So don't commit to ongoing obligations, but focus on strategic one-time investments aligned with the strategic plan, that we can utilize our current financial position to deliver on this. The third one is basically any future service expansions are going to require a different revenue source or a new revenue source. We can't go above and obligate ourselves to expand the network in areas beyond what we have in terms of revenue. So it's living within our means essentially, or going out and asking for more. So next. The fixed route. So fixed route is basically anywhere within your community where a bus now runs. Basically, these are our goals. Finalize the STA moving forward, which was the last strategic plan. Deliver those things we promised we would. Respond to any changes in the travel patterns based on the impact. And I'll get into that in a second, some of those changes we saw. Really ensure efficiency and effectiveness across the system, and then identify the best opportunities for future mobility. Go ahead. The third-party consultant that's assisting us, part of their work last fall and into the winter was to evaluate our network and what we've implemented. Their feedback to us was, you're outpacing your peers across the country in terms of your recovery and ridership. And these are a little dated, but it coincides with when they did their analysis that weekday ridership is at about where it was in 2019. Weekend ridership is exceeding 2019 levels. So I mentioned the pandemic and some shifts we've seen. There's weekend ridership like we didn't see before, and that's been a change. And that's in certain areas of the network, but it's a different feature of what we're seeing. And then the system-wide average for productivity is excellent for our size of system. Next slide. Opportunities they identified. Look at the commuter service, because certainly commute patterns have changed with reduced work weeks, working from home 1 day a week or 2 days a week. That's changed things. The region is growing, but in new areas, as you are well aware of. Focus on trying to improve where we can Spokane Valley service. There's a lot of development happening out there towards Liberty Lake. Improve West Plains service. Look at opportunities for on-demand in areas of the network or the PTBA where we don't have service currently. So we're looking at trying to possibly pilot something like that. And it wouldn't be door to door, meaning you call and like an Uber, it shows up and picks you up and takes you to your final destination. But could it be that it gets you to the network and then you're able to get use of the network? So, and then obviously weekend service. How can we build on that success that we're seeing? And then continue to implement the high performance transit network. Go ahead. So I mentioned, the expansion and improvement opportunities. There are two types. There's near-term and one-time investments. So within that first 5-year period of the plan being adopted. So looking at Division BRT and completing that in concert with and only when the north-south corridor with this go live. That's a real key
Segment of the
component.
north-south.
What's that?
Which segment of the north-south?
With the whole thing, when it's fully completed. 2030, that's the plan,
Hmm.
given that it's fully funded now, right? Improve and expand our high performance network, improve speed, reliability, upgrade stations, those type of things. And then on-demand service pilot, as I mentioned before. Long-term, look at improving and expanding that high performance transit network. Improve service, upgrade service, enhance frequency. The frequency on this high performance transit network is really a big deal because it doesn't eliminate, but it reduces the need to have a schedule and constantly check the schedule and when.
Can you elaborate, what is that for us?
So the high performance transit network is fixed routes that deliver better service, more frequent service, and have more robust set of amenities at key stops. So if you've been in Spokane, like, has anybody been in and around downtown Spokane? You see the at certain stops, like on Monroe, you'll see it. That's a really popular route. But you'll see a enhanced bus shelter with seating. You'll see it's a monument. I think we call it a monument. It's fairly tall. It has our logo on it, and embedded in that is a map, but also the screen that shows the monitor of when the next buses will arrive, which line, that type of thing.
So is this the city line or is that different?
That's different. City line is the bus rapid transit, which is what division will see something.
Isn't HPT defined at 15-minute frequency?
It's higher for, yeah, more frequent. So every 15 minutes, you're seeing a bus come through there. The bus rapid transit is at peak hours every 7.5 minutes a bus comes. So it's a lot more frequent. And that's really, you're hitting that threshold where people start to rely on transit more because it's more predictable and it's less variable and it's more convenient. Adding in the amenities, that's something we've heard. People want more than just a steel pole with a flag, you know, shocking, I know, but this is part of what we've been able to fund and implement across the network, and we will continue to. Again, continue improving evening and weekend service, expand the coverage, temporal, time-wise, and then geographic, where we can. And then possibly provide additional regional service. There's a lot of feedback we're getting about, you know, getting up into Deer Park, which is not within our network, or even looking at a pilot into, you know, Post Falls. There's a lot of traffic that comes over from IFO and creates a lot of congestion. In fact, a lot of people drive from Post Falls, park at Liberty Lake, park and ride, take the bus into Spokane. So next slide. So as I mentioned, we're getting a bunch of initiatives together from a variety of input avenues, but we're going to organize them based on the goals that they seem to fit under customer experience, partnerships, and capacity. So basically, those are what we're working on right now. Next slide. So this is the initiative and the investment framework pulled together in one slide. If you look on the left-hand side, right now we're collecting 0.8%. So that's that 0.2%. I believe that's it. That we're collecting on each dollar of sales tax. Everything within that parenthesis is our baseline, which is basically our operating and capital budget, plus core investments that I mentioned. That's division, and then the facilities master plan. ZEV is zero emissions vehicle transition. It doesn't necessarily mean electric. It could, but we keep it There's a lot of newer technologies out there. We do have some fully electric buses, obviously. But there are other technologies that are out there. People are starting to look into, so we keep it at just saying zero emissions. The enhancements, as I mentioned, are one-time initiatives, and then the enhancements plus, that would be the going out for additional revenue sources that I mentioned. What we see is within that 0.8% is we could, if that is renewed, we can deliver on this, on that first column, Y up to the green. Or the what under the green bar. So it's supporting those strategic goals by using existing resources. Part of that effort will be to identify the initiative list and then evaluate them and prioritize those investments. Next slide. This just identifies how we source all the different candidate initiatives that we're looking at. There's a variety of different ways. Surveys, we have an open survey currently right now. We're doing rider forums. We're engaging with community-based organizations. We're also trying to engage with employees of major employers in the community. Next slide. This is text version of what you just saw. Trying to think. Yes, our online survey, we've had about 388 responses. What I'll do is I'll send the link to Zach after this meeting. If you're interested in filling it out or forwarding it onto your network for input, please do. Let's see, we're also doing, so the Plan Commission presentations and then the Insight Network, it's a monthly survey. We have a small group of people who we have been delivering surveys via email, very short, 5 to 8 questions about particular topics related to transit, just to get their input. And then what we do is we summarize that in a narrative format and then send it back to them. So there's a feedback loop and then we post it on our website. But it's led to some interesting discoveries. One of them we had about the expectations of technology in transit and how people use it. So there's some things we're learning as we're going through this process. We're just getting ready to send one out here this week that's trying to get at how did people develop using transit as a habit? What was it that went from, oh, maybe I'll take this just this one time to, oh, I'm going to take it regularly. So trying to understand that, what's allowed them to maintain that habit. So next slide. That's it. Questions?
Do you have a map of the proposed routes for Airways?
I don't. I can get you
Okay.
something because I think there are going to be some tweaks to the network out here. If I was Carl, I could tell you descriptively what that future route will be because he knows it so well. But I don't work on the service side too much, so but I can send it on, see what I can get.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Any questions on this or what we're trying to do and what we're doing?
Yep. I'm the question guy. Yeah, my first question is, do you, well, as a background, I just read recently that the Puget Sound Light Rail just connected their link now from, I think, North Seattle to Bothell. So I think that was the latest one they've done. I don't think the one going south has made as much progress, but do you see light rail as being in the future here? 20, 30, 40 years?
In the future, yeah, I would say that could be something that would happen within the time frame of this plan. That's certainly not. But we do receive that feedback fairly frequently from people. But it's, the thing about it is what we're seeing with the bus rapid transit is it's much more affordable,
Sure.
a lot easier to implement. And I say easier, these projects do take a while. But I think, you know, someday there may be an opportunity, you know, from a growth standpoint that, you know, light rail could be supported.
So another question I have has more to do with, I guess, how can those of us who are not traditional riders find out how workable this is? For instance, a year or so ago, my wife was entertaining taking a position out at Wagstaff.
Yeah.
And we live here. We couldn't find, we looked at her driving and we said, well, that's just, it seems
Yeah.
insane to drive all that way back.
Yeah.
And we looked at the bus situation, and from what we could ascertain looking online, it was going to be multiple bus changes to get
Yeah.
there. And at the end of the day, that wasn't the only factor, but it was one of the factors that we just pulled the plug on the idea. So I guess maybe it's a two-part question or a two-sided question. Are you looking for how to make those kinds of transitions more simple as far as getting from point A to point B without making all these route
Yeah.
changes? And then how is that being communicated to the non-riding public so we might get on board? No pun intended.
Yeah, so annually, we're constantly refining our service. We're looking at ways we can improve that. And one of the benefits is we're pretty tuned in to where growth is happening, and we're understanding that. There's a slide on here that we didn't use, but it talks about these high performance transit routes, you know, putting out newer ones that will allow trips to occur that don't necessarily have to go through downtown. There was a slide that showed one that was from community college to community college up along Wellesley. Yeah, that one right there. Doesn't go through downtown at all, but it's a real strong east-west connection with two population centers at each end. We talked about the valley, trying to improve transit there. And that's an employment area, you know, that we're certainly looking at. So I think part of it is there's a lot of tools. I use Google Maps just to plan a trip. Just punch in the address and the time of day that you think you might be going, and just try to see what it would look like for a trip for you. Like here, I'd never taken transit out here before. Took it out here. Dropped me off right over there at Garfield and 6th, and 10-minute walk. I was here. So I think it a lot of times flies under the radar. You just don't realize how accessible the network is. But using the Google Maps, that would be my first recommendation. Just see it, and then just try it. You know, there's a lot of improvements we're making, and as we continue on, one of the things, an example is the I-90 corridor, trying to improve that linkage along there so that we can deliver another way to move people that's not necessarily on the streets, but more on the interstate, that type of thing. So.
Comment question now from Cheney High School. My daughter will in order to come over to Airway Heights, she has to go downtown first on the STA. She has to go all the way downtown and and easy come all the way back up. Is there a little shot? Is that one of the routes maybe
Yeah, I think, and I can't recall. I thought part of the West Plains Transit Center investment was to make it so you wouldn't have to do that. You know, maybe a time of day thing, I'm not sure, but
after school, you know, it'd be
yeah, I think it would be. But I'll look into that.
maybe a route like right through.
Yeah, well, and there's so much employment
Oh,
growth.
yeah, Amazon, and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
there's a lot, so. If it's not here, it's probably something we certainly are looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
And you guys manage the van pool thing, right? That's.
Yeah,
followed
yeah,
you guys?
paratransit
Is that, is that still pretty robust?
Mhm.
I know for the base, I used to work the base and it was a huge push,
Yeah,
you know, in the early 2000s, I think, to get, you know, commute trip reduction and
Mhm.
the guard was on board with it and everybody was
Yeah.
on board with it and that was one of the things that surprised my wife about Wagstaff. She looked it up. They don't apparently have any kind of ride sharing.
yeah,
out
that's
there.
interesting.
She
I know
thought for sure she could find.
yeah, anybody over 100 employees is kind of obligated by state law to participate in that commute trip reduction. But who does? I mean, to what extent? You know, there's a lot of different ways you can encourage commute trip so reductions.
And we keep the STA tell the parades just for the event of it all.
Convenient, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, the kids and everything, we just
Yeah.
do it all for the whole shindig of it.
Yeah.
So other thoughts for Brian about needs in this region for transit?
Regionally? Well, I mean, you're spot on. I mean, all we have to do is look at the growth outlet airport and all of those facilities are being built and along with Farland and all around us.
I think one thing I've been saying at all the planning commissions, because I was asked that question, one of the first ones on Liberty Lake is how can we help you or help STA be successful? And from a planning perspective, this is my new motto, is that land use should chase transit. If you want more bang for your buck in terms of a return on ridership, if you can ensure that you're aligning land use with transit routes, it will help STA be a lot more successful and grow the network and deliver better service. It doesn't help when an employer locates somewhere off the transit lines or in an area where there's affordable land and a lot of land he can develop on and he can park on.
Well, we're gonna talk about that in just a second.
Yeah, so it's, and then later on they say, well, can you help us? We have all these employees and we're really struggling, or even with the housing development, you know, there's somebody who's talking about a senior center. It's like, well, or senior housing development, you know.
Well, and I think for us locally, I mean, in the very near term, the 6th Avenue redo will be a huge boost. I live out that direction and
Yeah.
nearby where Highland Village is going up like gangbusters. We've got, you know, just amazingly increased density out there. And I watch people from the senior community have to hoof it
Mhm.
3/4 of a mile
Yep.
during,
Yeah.
on stretches where there aren't sidewalks all the way to get to the nearest bus stop. And so, you know, we're looking forward to seeing that.
STA was the
Rectified.
first $2 million of that project. And so with that money, we'll be able to bring transit all the way, you know, through 6th Avenue and Touch Craig Road.
It's great.
But it is a good point, and that kind of gets to the offhand comment about employers. Can you turn on the flares with the Fairchild Air Force Base, safety zones? 700. Our planning around land use is a result of the impacts of our neighbors.
These invisible boundaries.
It's not really invisible. Can you turn on the airport one too?
Well, in terms of, you don't see it unless you have.
Yeah, so when we think about employment and the opportunity for transit, both the airport and Fairchild overlap 3/4 of the city.
Yeah.
So the result of that is why all of our residential is concentrated in what we call the donut hole. Is that this actually comes around, that's how country
Yeah.
comes around. And everything outside of that area, we don't have any choices when it comes to land use other than to allow non-residential, so industrial and commercial.
Yeah.
So as we move forward, it would be great, to think about in tandem, if you can zoom into 21st Avenue, which is the plan that we have for providing not only a parallel route for US two to bring freight and to have a kind of a backbone to an employment area, but it is going to connect all the way from Spokane at Deer Heights, and eventually in the interim, it'll connect to Craig Road and the roundabout at Craig Road, but eventually it'll connect in from what is Spokane Fuel at US two. So it'll go further through the county and it'll go north. And so what we can do in the future would be really helpful is using that as the spine of potential access, because it is now designated as a collector. It's part of our mutual jurisdictional plan, Spokane County.
But no residential
Well, it's not allowed.
employment.
So it'll only be employment based, for purposes of thinking about trying to pick up people that are working in that corridor, and then the next street down, which is McFarland, are, going to be the two that probably have most of the large employers. So obviously we have Amazon, we have Exotic Metals,
Yeah.
already along McFarland. We have FPA, which is where Mark is at, who's our chair. He has a business located along that corridor. So from an employment opportunity, thinking about not just living, but people getting to work as a
Yeah.
full
Right.
area for service.
Yeah, that's especially shift presents a different challenge.
Well, we're finding, and you may have heard this, but everybody talks about congestion and traffic impacts. So these employers are savvy enough to say, "Oh no, we do shift work. Our shift is 6 to 3:30," and Mark's gonna laugh because of what McFarland's turned into. Like, we don't have PM peak hour impact because we have earlier shifts. Mark, you want to go ahead and talk about McFarland?
Well, I mean, that traffic doesn't stop on that road anymore. It's just nonstop all day long, and regardless of what Amazon says about the start end times, you see people coming and going from that building all day long, and it's not just the delivery vehicles, which they're always going to, but on the transit side of things, there's no real good way to get from that area down there on McFarland without walking up like Lawson, Russell, Garfield, and none of those roads are really developed with sidewalk paths or pedestrian safe, I guess would be the way to say it. So it's just getting more and more congested as Amazon has grown and Exotic Metals added in their second location down there. And then we have down, not in Airway, but down south of that, the airport owns all that land now. And they're looking at expanding that. So I'm going to assume they're going to do the same thing and let these businesses come in, and McFarland will just keep getting more and more impacted during that.
Yeah.
So I think moving forward, as we give comments about the 2035 plan, this idea about, we'd love to encourage land use where there's transit, but we also have to have transit where there's going to be concentration of land use. So it's a kind of a two-way street to use that we have to plan accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good feedback that I would send you the link for the survey, and we're collecting all sorts of stuff about particular geographic areas, where there's input and thoughts about service. And it would be great if we were aligned with, every city's, updates to their comprehensive plans.
Oh, this goes back 20 years.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, so that we could align, our strategic plan and what we're planning with everybody else's updates. But we have to get this input,
Yeah.
so.
So, I understood, and I know you don't have the map in front of you, but I understood that US2 is going to be our higher performance transit route sometime in the future as part of the 2035 plan. Can you kind of outline for the planning commission when that happens sometime in the future? What would that mean, and what would be some of the ways that we could support each other?
Yeah, so that would be, and I don't know if it'd be in the first 5 years or the second 5-year period. But once it's identified, we would start a planning process internally. And we would likely, as I've seen it happen, the transit authority engage with the community, your community planning commission, likely on what that means for changes to the service and stops and whatnot. So there would be a level of engagement with businesses and with residents and just citizens as we planned the route ultimately, and then where the stops were going to be. Because with those stops, as I mentioned, they come with a lot more robust investments in the amenities so that they don't move very frequently. We're not going to pick up and move that stop. So all of that needs public input. And we'd look at areas and we'd look at the plans that you have and like for your city center and see how we can best leverage what you're planning, where the growth is happening and where it is intended to happen in the future, both residential and employment. So, but I don't know if that would be in the first 5 years or the second 5-year period. Certainly would be in that period.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Is your ridership metrics, is that available anywhere for those of you guys like me who want to go look stuff up?
Yeah, we have I think if you go to the Wikipedia, there's an entry for Spokane Transit, and one of our citizen advisory committee members puts in the monthly ridership number as they happen. So we don't publish it there. I just did get some information today on ridership, just anecdotally. Carl sent this forward. What did he say? This is the 42nd week of the city line being active. Wednesday, May 1st was 38,497 rides, a post-COVID high. Confidence not the highest ridership day for 2024. The highest ridership day was 10/1/2014 at 49,000. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, he didn't have any monthly, but you can go look at those on the Wikipedia entry for STA and show you what monthly ridership numbers are. So. There you go.
Well, I appreciate all that information.
Yeah. Absolutely. Happy to share.
Look forward to seeing the public transit system grow as the years progress.
Yes, we'll be doing more out here. As far as
It's
investments
well
go.
needed.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just getting to, like you're saying, not just getting to and from other areas in the county, but within your community. So. Especially West Plains, as you mentioned, it's growing and just needing to go downtown to get to a city that seems
Well, even things like grocery shopping, you've got the on the other side of I-90 where all that growth is, fake Cheney as they call it. There's another grocery store on.
No,
It's hard to believe there's not one else.
Few fast food places with no services.
Gas, but you can eat, but you
Yeah.
can't buy groceries.
Gotta come over here. Well, and all that sales leakage, sales tax leakage from Cheney comes over this way. To Walmart. So.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you. Okay, you get to 6 in Garfield, but.
I know, I'm gonna have to be down first.
Right. Might be good.
Coming back, we'll give you a ride if you miss it.
Oh, yeah. There'll be another, there'll always be another bus, right?
Always will be.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll send you
Thank
that
you.
information.
Perfect.
Take care.
Thanks.
Hey, before we go on to this section, can we make a note that Pleasant showed up at 6:12?
6:12. Thank you. Got it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a doorbell.
Yeah, this is huge. This is exciting to have this there.
Other duties is a sign, right? Doorbell. Mark, so the next item is a presentation for the public records retention training. This is another video. I went ahead and put the YouTube link into the chat. You won't be able to hear audio, I think. So if you can't hear audio, just go ahead and pull it up and play it for yourself there.
All right, thanks, Zach.
And if you're ready to go, I can get this going.
Yes, please.
This one's a little longer. I apologize.
No worries.
So question is, why did you have to sit here for 27 and a half minutes to go through this?
No, no.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What was the question? Why did you have to sit here for 27 and a half minutes? And it's not because we want to be mean.
Required.
Yeah.
Requirement.
Yeah, so just real simply, as serving in your capacity as a planning commission member, your official role is advisory to the city council. That means all of the communication regarding the business of the planning commission is a public record. That means everything that we receive in an email, the recordings of the meetings today, any hearings and the resultant documents that come out of those hearings are all public record. So if you, one way to think of this is, this was, told me by a supervisor once upon a time, is if unless you want to see it on the front page of the newspaper, or you want your mom to read that article on the front page of the newspaper, don't write it. So, sorry, Mark?
I just laughed.
Oh, yeah, so, it's really tempting to not think of that and think of communication as being a lot less formal. You don't have to worry for the most part about saving any of your communication, because as soon as it hits us, it is part of the public record, moving forward. And those retention schedules, those are for things for our clerk's office to be aware of and worry about moving forward. But it's one of the reasons why we're really careful to make sure we adhere to the other principles that you've had training about, which is the appearance of fairness in the open public meetings, and to make sure that there isn't any communication or actions by the council that violates the Open Public Meeting Act, creates bias on the part of an individual commission member, And that, we certainly need to retain anything that comes in related to the documentation around project. So in a nutshell, that's why you go through this. And most of this was really responsibilities on the city's part, but when you put it in an email or you put it down in a letter or you vote for it, or you're speaking on a recording, which happens every time we have a quorum, you're always on the record. That's it.
So be at our next meeting.
Well.
Be conscious of what you're saying.
Noted.
Thank you. Sorry.
All right, well, I assume that's the end of our public records or training for tonight.
Yes, certificates forthcoming. Just not
Nice.
tonight.
Nice. And we don't have any public hearings scheduled for tonight, so let's move on to our missing middle housing workshop.
Do you want me to run through this or you want?
Oh, we can talk to you.
Well, let's try and not spend too much time. So what we wanted to do is introduce the requirements that Heather and I are now working with framework on for updating our municipal code and comprehensive plan to integrate missing middle housing, which is required through House Bill 1110. Well, this is a big thing, so I'm trying to frame it correctly. Does everybody know what middle housing is, or do you want me to go into that a little bit? I'll get into, well, let me get into the specifics. First off, what House Bill 1110 requires is that middle housing be allowed on all lot zone, predominantly for residential uses, including minimum lot unit standards, maximum parking requirements, and requiring administrative design review in cases where the design review is used. The city of Airway Heights is a tier 3 city. Tier 3 cities are cities with populations under 25,000 that are contiguous with a UGA of the largest city in the county with a population of over 275,000. So those are our fun neighbors to the west, Spokane. So they are prompting us to comply with this House bill.
We've
I'm trying to
we crossed the threshold.
I'm trying not so like they're dragging us, but we are required to plan because of our relationship with the city of Spokane. Otherwise, if Spokane wasn't there, we would not be required to meet the standards that tier 3 cities are required. Speaking of which, the standards that tier 3 cities are required to meet are 2 dwelling units per lot on all lots zoned predominantly residential, unless the zoning permits higher densities. In this case, it does not. So essentially think of our R1 zone or single family zone is now going to require 2 dwelling units per lot. Is there any additional background you want to cover?
Yeah, so this is combined with an additional House bill that had to do with accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
So we'll go over it. So what it essentially does is, by mid 2025, we have to update our development regulations in order to facilitate these new requirements. So, as a background, the legislature required the Department of Commerce to provide some grant opportunity in order to help pay for the analysis that would be needed in order to accomplish this task. And so we did that. We applied for the grant. We hired a consultant, which is Framework. So the materials you're looking at are basically how the consultant is breaking the project down. The very first stage that we're talking about is background. And then the next thing is going to be really kind of auditing, like where are we at compared to these requirements? where are we at today? And so that's really what Zach's gonna go over with you tonight, just to give you a context.
Yeah, tonight is really just consider it like a visioning or framing session. We're just framing the project, and then as we progress with our consultant, we will be bringing different typologies and layouts and thoughts about it to get feedback, and then we'll integrate that feedback into our process. So today is.
Couple of questions.
Mhm.
So you used required. I want to make sure I'm understanding this right. We're required by law to allow these kinds of densities but we're not. No particular lot is necessarily forced to have one. Is that a correct?
That's
interpretation?
correct. That's correct, because government doesn't create housing,
Right.
right? All we do is enable. And that was one of the primary issues that existed in the state of Washington, was complaints that local jurisdictions, regulations prevented these types of housing to occur in communities. So now this new law requires local government to change the code in order to facilitate these new housing types, which will necessitate also changing some of our standards, the envelope in which a building can be, or multiple buildings can be created on the lot in essence. Now, part two, which we're gonna start briefing the planning commission, is having to do with the comp plan. And in that scenario, it becomes a bit closer to how are we going to ensure that we can meet our housing forecast? And that would go a little bit beyond things like just fund development standards. That might start looking at things like incentives to encourage the kind of.
I have a follow-on question, but I figured we'd get to that.
Yeah, that'll happen later on this summer, this fall, but this is kind of the basics of what we're required to do and an audit of where we're at compared to where we need to go.
So the HB 1110 requires that the tier 3 cities that we are allow at least 6 of the 9 types of middle housing. The types of middle housing are defined here. So you got duplexes, tri, 4, 5, 6, townhomes, stack flats, courtyard, and cottage. Those are the 9 types of middle housing. The Commerce's user guide for middle housing recommends that we amend to allow 3 of these 4 types. I believe this is just as we're required to allow 6 of the 9 types, but these are the 4 that we're required, so we have some flexibility in the other 2. Is that how that reads?
Yeah, so what happened was the legislator created a bill that applied to communities of all different kinds of sizes. And so that of these different types, you have to pick 6 of the 9. This is combined with, of course, that bill that said you had to have at least 2 units per lot. And there was another bill that was independently created that required us to allow for 2 accessory dwelling units on every lot in addition to this. And as when you look at that list, accessory dwelling units, also known as granny flats, aren't included on as your eligible list. So when the State Department of Commerce, which is the entity that's responsible for helping create guidebooks and model ordinances, looked at this, they realized that you could actually achieve the requirements of both bills by simply allowing only 4 of the housing types. And the Department of Commerce's guidance is if you could do at least 4 rather than the 6, and one of those is the ADUs, then you'll have met the intent. So it's confusing.
Very confusing.
But they're looking at what the metric is, which is how many units per lot you're allowing based on this combination. And it's going to make more sense the deeper we get into this, because in that audit, they'll start showing buildings as units, so you can start to count. If someone were to give you Skittles, like, that's how we're looking at it, like, here's the lot, I'm gonna give you 3 Skittles, and then I'm gonna add a 4th Skittle, and that's gonna kind of show us what happens when we start thinking in terms of dwelling units, whether they're all encapsulated in a single building, or they're spread out in different buildings in a lot.
So in this graphic here, it's kind of showing what Heather's talking about, but in this case, there's Skittles and Starbursts.
We could do this with M&Ms instead, if that work better.
Or Mondos and, what is another circular candy? Dots.
Dots. But you get the idea.
So then, so for HB 1110, the 2 things we're currently considering and looking at it are 2 policy choices, which are a unit density, which is the base unit is 2, like we previously said. And we're considering whether to add scalability, as long as sites can meet code requirements. And then the additional policy consideration we're making is to allow housing types, or specific housing types, which we would allow, which again goes up to this list here. Fill in there.
Okay, so unit density is that M&M Skittle exercise. Like, if we had a lot and we needed to get to under one code, you had to have a minimum of 2 units, and another code says you also have to have 2 ADUs, but they don't qualify for the 2 units, then you're really talking about a minimum of 3. That's the magic. When you start to combine these 2 laws, and that's when we start thinking about, okay, well, what different configurations? So 3 is the density. What different types of housing unit types can I combine to get to 3? Well, I could do 1 ADU and a duplex. I could do 1 ADU and a stacked flat, which is a duplex over a duplex. Or I could do a single family and 2 ADUs. That's what housing type that's allowable is speaking to, but the density goal we're going toward is really 3. Because that when we look at combining those 2 new laws, it's not just 2 units per lot, it's actually 3. That's what it means in simple terms. So again, we're not requiring it, we're just making an allowance. So on an existing lot, we're most likely to see someone do the ADU option. It would either be converting within the home, like the basement, into an ADU and adding an ADU at the back. Or we'd see the home with 2 separate ADUs in the backyard. Literally, that's the base level of density and housing type we're gonna see that we'd have to allow in the code. It's that simple. I just beat through the whole.
That's
Presentation.
simple.
Then it gets in the weeds a little bit, so.
Well, I would keep going past all of this, but that's a nutshell, and we need to get a piece of paper.
It actually, look, there's a, remember if there's a link in what you sent us in the package. The State Commerce website, Department of Commerce website actually has obviously it has a whole ton of this stuff.
Yeah.
And they have some good fact sheets. There's some good, what do you call them? Just stories about communities that have done this or that, what the outcome's been. It's actually quite a
There's a
load of information.
There's a lot, and tonight's purpose was trying to like start with definitions.
Let's start with concepts.
Yeah, I was intended as a primer, I'm gonna use paper. We're gonna start using coloring exercises here.
That's totally fine.
I understand.
Starburst, Skittles,
Starburst thing.
ADUs.
Bobby has 3 Legos on his lot. Does Susie have to build 4 Legos on her lot?
Yeah, well, and all of this stuff is coming in all at the same time. And initially, at least in my read, it was that there was some stuff in 1337 that didn't necessarily contemplate 1110 and vice versa. So they've cleaned it up a bit. It makes a little more sense now, but like we're like living it in real time, like
Right.
watching them make the amendments. So it's fun and stuff, and we understand the intent. That's the important part.
But then comes the fun of
So just,
connecting it with building and public work standards on top of it.
Oh, yeah.
How do you get to?
And that
oh,
was,
right,
do that.
right.
That's the purpose of the audit.
yeah,
Right, oh my,
yeah. Well,
So we, go ahead.
sorry, just think about things like stormwater, how that works, how the GFC charges, so connections, sewer charges. If you have 3 lots, the way it's written right now is for 1 connection per lot. That doesn't make sense, or does it? It touches, and I'll show you a graphic here of every single code we're looking at, but it's an octopus, you know, it touches so many different sections because our code wasn't written with the intent of allowing this sort of housing. So
Right,
it's
yeah.
tricky real quick.
Yeah, so just so I'm, make sure I'm clear on this. So our existing rule set for the city, our ordinances and up until state law passed, maybe even some state things. You had an R1 lot, you were restricted to building a single residence on that lot, right?
Yeah.
Now, we have to allow and cannot stop. Under most circumstances, we cannot prohibit the building of additional units on the lot. That's the whole intent of it.
Yeah.
In the fine print, there's all the things that they tell you you can't do. You can't use setbacks and different things to prohibit the accomplishment of this, right? So they've taken away the potential procedural roadblocks that a community might want.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just really don't want that. We
So
don't want
the intent is to allow additional density to kind of take pressure off the housing crisis,
Right.
right? That doesn't necessarily mean we're gonna throw out things like setbacks and stuff like that. We'll still have specific development regulations per zone.
Mhm.
But so, and that always exists, right? So right now, if you wanted to put a single family home on a single family lot, you'd have to be able to fit it within our standards for building coverage, setbacks, all that.
Mhm.
Right now, today, actually this morning, you know, we met with our consultants and these are the things we're doing. We're doing test fits for like a typical single family lot. Like, okay, what can we do? Say we put a house here. How big is an ADU? How did the setbacks work? So that's the stuff kind of what we're doing right now. It's not ready to show to you yet.
Well, right, no, I get it.
But just because we're gonna allow the units doesn't mean we're gonna throw setback. So I guess that's my point.
Right.
So to make it really simple. And maybe we should have M&Ms next time because we can make it funner.
I think it
Is breaking through all of this language about accessory dwelling units, which are granny flats, and looking at the minimum of 2 units per lot. It really breaks down to, it's very simply, we can choose to allow, obviously the ADUs, because by law we have to. We can allow for duplexes. We can allow for stacked flats. We can allow for cottage housing and courtyard apartments. So the one on the left represents a triplex. If somebody builds a triplex, we've met the minimum state law, we're good.
Mhm.
In the next example, someone has an existing single family and they put 2 accessory dwelling units in the backyard. Good, we're done. In the next example, they do a single family, but they convert the bottom, the basement into an ADU and add an ADU on the lot. Good, we're all done. If we do hard to read upside
Let's
down.
say stack.
That's a stacked flat.
Um,
So you have 1 unit above the other, they're each individual dwelling units and an ADU, you're good. If you do a duplex and you do an ADU, you're good. And the third one could either be a cottage housing complex, or it could be a courtyard apartment. In a courtyard apartment, they'd be touching, but in a cottage housing complex on a lot, so the 3 single family homes, we're good.
Oh, can we back up to the 3? Where did we get the density of 3 again when I thought the thing said?
Because
6?
we're combining
So you get 2 base unit plus the 182.
That's the minimum.
that's the minimum.
Because they're 2 separate bills. One requires 2 units per lot, the other bill requires an additional unit on top of it.
Be allowed.
To be the accessory dwelling unit.
So up to and including.
Yeah, right. But again,
But it's
these
not
are
a mandate.
these are maximums. So if someone wanted to go and build a single family development, that's totally fine. It's up to them. We're just allowing the extra
Right.
densities within our codes.
And that's why when you go back to the list under definitions, the Department of Commerce has concluded that once we meet the tenet of the law, the underlying law about ADUs intensity, 2 units, we are not forced to choose unit types that go above 3. So that's why we don't have to do 4 plexes, 5 plexes, and 6 plexes.
So just hypothetically, why would we exclude any of those?
We could choose to do more. Where we're at is them explaining what we're required to do at a minimum or at the beginning stages. And this is a very basic question because we will start building upon some assumption decisions we build from here. So if 3 is the minimum, then they're going to start, and they have done an audit on our existing lot, like, could we physically fit 3 units on these lots and still meet some size requirements that apply to units? And obviously there's building code issues, with regard to separation and stuff like that. So that's where the audit comes in, and they'll also be auditing our code to say, you need to be here, but your setbacks don't allow that, or you need to be here and your building site coverage doesn't allow this, or you need to be here and you have an issue with your parking requirements, or you need to be here and you don't have any access to the backyard to build on these. So that's where they're going to tell us, how realistically we can create a code that would facilitate, but we're not required to build it.
Who's doing this audit and what?
This is the consultant frameworks that we did the request for proposals, and we selected to do the work.
So Mark served committee.
Oh, right, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So they have experience already in this area. They helped the city of Snohomish has completed their work. So they have under their belt helped them get to this, because these regulations happened while some of the communities on the west side were still completing their comp plans, and they didn't necessarily get additional time like early adopters, the 2024 adopters did. So that's all this means is we had all these options, but they're saying we only by law have to meet the minimum, and this is what that drawing represents. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, we're a tier 3 city, so there are higher tier cities within this.
Right.
So that's why there are additional definitions for larger and more.
So Spokane has to get to 6.
There's also transit implications for allowing density bonuses.
Yeah, and the high performance transit areas like down Division Street, the density is even greater.
So we are having to do this, but the point is this could have been a much more intense process, but.
And we can choose to do more, but this is the minimum moving forward. So you want to keep
So when are we
rolling down?
choosing? What are we choosing then? Is this what we're deciding?
Well, no, this is what we have to do at a minimum.
Sure.
We're not making any choices. We're just
Okay,
saying
good.
these are the ones they say will help us meet the minimum. And that's why I did the quick little
Mhm.
drawing there.
Yeah, I got it.
So Heather, I know, go back and forth. You had mentioned, I think, or alluded to us as a city getting to where we need to get for our housing need projections and things, right? Is that a reference to the comp plan?
So separately, what will happen and what's happening right now is a discussion about how many housing units that we will plan toward for 2026. Because remember, we're into a comprehensive plan cycle. So getting to your question about, do we want to think about the 4-plex, the 5-plex, and the 6-plex in larger courtyard apartments? The answer is yes, because when we get our housing allocation, we're going to have to show that through our zoning, we were able to create development standards that will facilitate at a minimum that number of units. So this exercise at this moment is based on a separate bill saying you have to allow for at least this many. when we get that housing allocation, we may have to choose portions of the city that we would allow these other types of housing in order to say, yes, we think that within 20 years, we'll get to our 5,536 more housing units, because this scenario will only generate 1,333.
And conversely, if we said, no, if we had the options, which we don't, but to stick to say, single house on a single lot R1, we're gonna run out of land before we can ever meet those projection needs. Right?
Well, what would happen is, we will, at the end of this process, we will understand that by changing our regulations to allow at least 3 and compare that to the projections, which we shared last week, 2 weeks ago with the consultant, they will say this minimum will get you only so far with your current residential. But as we work through the comp plan update, which, you know, may be a different consultant, they're going to have to kind of finish those calculations. They're going to come back and say, you're going to have to upzone this much acreage and allow these additional kinds of housing, and that will get you another 2,000 units. But if you're only at 3,300 units and your forecast is 5,200, that's when we look again at those urban growth areas and say, okay, we need another 150 acres at this minimum in order to get to our 5,200. This is the first part of really a 2-part exercise that we will go through between now and 2026.
Our allocation hasn't finalized yet, so we don't actually know the number.
It's actually pretty close to 5,500
Yeah, it's
new housing units. But that number of units, somewhere roughly in there, will have to be broken down into income. It is broken down into income groups. So remember I had talked about incentivizing, like how, if we have to create 300 housing units for people that make 30% of area median income, and that translates into, if you're a single head of household, you're going to be making like $34,000 a year. That's your net income, right? So how do we help that many people rent or likely rental, and may not be ownership, but how do we get them into housing that they can afford at rent? And so as we work through this number, we'll be sharing back information like, well, how much rent is somebody who makes 30% of area median, you know, $34,000, how much rent can they afford? Well, it's probably less than $500 a month. So then we start thinking about, again, coming back to these other housing options. They can help with this kind of need, but we'll also have to think about incentives, like, you know, would we give bonus density, or there are things that we would waive, or we would do to encourage a housing provider, because remember, we're not making the housing, but we would encourage a housing provider, like, let's say Catholic Charities, to walk into Airway Heights and build those 300 units at 300, you know, 30% of area median income, because we have enough incentives to draw them in to build that housing. In other words, we're going to have to look at how we can, and this is longer term, we're going to have to look at how we're going to reduce the cost of construction in order to make it more cost effective ultimately for someone to provide that kind of housing. So I'm giving you like the big picture, like here's the table, buffet table. We're over here at appetizer.
big plate, actually. We're like that.
Well-
Well, yeah, I was gonna ask, I guess, you know, kind of how long and how much are we gonna look at this? Because I've got a zillion questions. I know some of them will be solved by the banking industry and the real estate industry and the appraisal industry, because I'm, in my brain, I'm going, the clause about you have to make these, you cannot prohibit these, say, these ADUs from being sold off separately, which means now we're gonna carve off a hunk of that property.
Yep, let me have the drawing right here.
Yep, I'm reading all this stuff, my head's exploding.
It's pretty simple. So and the consultant's fantastic. They've already looked down the road because remember, they're doing an audit. They're doing an audit about our code. They're like, oh, you got a problem here. So they're going to propose to us that we would have a type of subdivision that is specific to ADUs, because by law, we have to allow them to eventually be divided off. So what that means for us is a subdivision code that's after the fact. You don't do it before, you do it after the development, and it has to include things like, how are they gonna get there?
Yeah.
What's gonna happen to that water and sewer line? What happens with the power? So when one of their recommendations will be, and this is one of the questions I had today, is like, are you gonna draft it for us? And they said yes. So I'm like, yay. So we'll end up with a package at the end of this year. We have to adopt this, and we're going to end up with a package that's going to help facilitate those kinds of requirements that are in the bill. But we're going to have to answer questions like, well, what do you want to do? Airway Heights about water. Well, you know, there's some decisions we have to make, like maybe from our part, like, and this is just a what if, don't take this to the bank, Don. But what if the city doesn't care and we just want a single meter? Like maybe everything after that, we don't care how this gets divided up for purposes of water service. We're just reading a single water connection and we're billing an entity. Or maybe it is that we, through the creation of this lot, we start requiring utility and access easements to be part of the project. So now they're assured their own taps and connection, and they have a permanent, method of access. And what we'll learn from the audit is that a lot of property even though we would allow it in the code, it would be unpractical for them ever to do it because of the way our current code allows. So we have no alleys, right?
Right.
Our current code between the garage and the house allows for a 50% coverage, and our setbacks are 5 feet. We have no alleys. So there are things that are going to preclude people from doing detached ADUs, but they still could do an internal ADU. And if it's done right, under the statute, they could condo it.
Yeah, both statutes I highlighted there that require the city allows separate sale of units and land that land sits on, so. That's important to note. While we're talking about this.
Yeah, I saw that note and I just went, whoa.
Yeah.
Doggies, whoa.
Let's make it a little more complicated.
Oh, and again, I read the notes about, like I said, Snohomish, and again, my thing is, man, I want to call the appraisers over there and go, what did you guys think of this deal? And how would you even approach that? But again, that's banks and title companies, and that's their problem to figure out, I guess, along with the rest of us.
They're struggling now. Appraisers are trying to figure out how to value an ADU on.
Oh, yeah.
They're having a hard time trying to figure out what the value is of that.
Right.
Well, and we'll get into this code audit, but ADUs right now are kind of weird. You don't see them a lot on this side of the state, at least. But I think people love the idea of them, but the practicality of them is a little tough. So right now we have a section here, 1724, that's called conditional ADUs, which they're not conditional because we can't require that for a different state law.
Our code is already non-compliant with state law. You can't require a discretionary hearing process for ADUs. That got changed years ago.
But in the time I've been here, 4 years, I've gotten 50 calls about ADUs, 0 have turned into applications.
Mhm.
So people love the idea of them, but the practicality, they're not cheap, they're not, necessarily easy to do. But
Well, I
now,
think they're throwbacks to the old days where people were putting mom-in-law apartments over their garages at the back of the lot.
Those was
I think
during
there's a
World War
few of those
II,
that
yeah.
should-
Yeah, that's what.
It was World War II and it was during the Depression. You can see that all over Spokane. When you look at houses, particularly large houses that, that survived that era. So the practical, the nuts and bolts of this is that our obligation is to create a body of code that facilitates it. Later on, we're gonna have to create a body of incentives to get the right people and the right income brackets into housing. So why is it so difficult to do an ADU today? Number one, they're expensive. So to build a new ADU is gonna cost you, probably 160 to 240. It's not an inexpensive.
Hypothetically, couldn't, what, the tiny homes be considered an ADU? I mean, I guess it would depend on.
Do you know how much a tiny home is?
I
they're
don't know,
80
they act like they're cheap enough for people to afford them, and people are building them.
There's a
Build on
lot,
top of it.
there's a lot right now on 395 across from the Fred Meyer, and they're selling tiny homes. You would not spend less than
you're
$60,000.
starting with 80 right now.
Right. So they're cost prohibitive. So who is likely to have money? And keep in mind, if they didn't have the cash, they need to borrow.
Mhm.
So who has the borrowing authority, borrowing power? Is somebody who's been sitting in their home who has a lot of equity,
Mhm.
right? Or they have a good enough paying job to not only support their existing mortgage, but to add. So I'm beginning to paint a picture for you, right? Then, if you do it, this is probably a one-time in your life experience. How well are people prepared just to build a garage,
Right.
let alone a dwelling unit? It's a not insurmountable, but it requires a lot of investment in time and energy by an individual to understand how to do an ADU. So you have the financing, you have the complexity of the process, and then you've got, whatever the regulations are in order to be able to do it. And at the same time, what is the return back to the individual? There are solutions to all of these, and over time, the conclusion is it's a three-part process, right? So it's the local government allowing that and creating mechanisms to make it easier. It's potentially how we can partner with individual property owners to make it more cost effective. To do that, and we'll talk about what some examples of that are. And then the other piece is ultimately this division. Like, as a person, am I gonna really carry that debt? And that's where these laws came in to say, but you can't prohibit them from selling them off. So somebody can get out from underneath that debt.
Mhm.
They can even make profit, obviously, by doing it. So these are some things that happen as a result of the real barriers to ADUs, and we're focusing a lot on that tonight. But what we can do as a government is we can certainly create standards to allow them without additional hearing process. So that's predictability and it's cost effective. We can look at how we facilitate these by reducing our standards above and beyond just allowing it. So maybe no parking is required. Maybe we allow access by easement or utilities by easement, which we don't do today. And then the other part comes down to just basic opportunity to build it. And this is something that other communities have done, which is, hey, is your lot at least 7,200 square feet? I have 3 ADU plans for you to pick from. These have already been engineered and pre-approved. Pick one. Give me a site plan, meet the new setbacks, you're good.
So this is Seattle's pre-approved ADU portal. I knew where you're going on that. Look at that. We're getting there with this talk, but it allows you to take a look at freezing up the computer. Anyway.
So,
Mark can hear me. Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, cool. Then it's just my mouse pad. All right, we're just not gonna touch that.
so we're at the beginning, again, we're at the appetizer level and, you know, by the time we get to dessert, it's gonna look like that.
And how long do you think that's gonna be?
Less than 2 years because that's the law.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
Coming soon into a
Coming
theater.
soon to a lot
near
near
you.
you.
Yeah, these are, and we're lucky, you know, we applied for the grant right away. Because everybody else has to do this for free. And if you didn't apply for the grant, you're not getting money to do this. And this is obviously complex and we appreciate the opportunity to bring in, you know, staff that have done this before for another community and, you know, have some experience around these questions. And we could do all the research in the world along with all of the current planning projects and climate change and comp plan kickoff and transportation planning.
Sorry, today's the first day we're using all this, as everybody knows. So we're having to do some MacGyvering over here, so, and some duct tape and some stuff, but we'll make it work. But yeah, Seattle has this really, and I was showing Heather this the other day, they have such a cool, pre-approved, they allow you to do property searches for, identifying lots that allow, EDUs on them. It's just a really cool tool. I'm not gonna spend more time on this. If you're curious about ADUs, this is a really good site. It's called AD Universe, which is fun and cute. But this is all built on our GIS too, by the way. It's a story map. I've been trying to really, maybe we have these fun tools. I just don't have time. Anyway, but we can go down we don't have to go through actually all of this, but we do want to give you a visual representation of the potential impacts of middle housing and how much work this is going to be and how many things we're considering. So these are the codes we're reviewing for zoning dimensional parking standards or classification maps, single family residences, because again, this is going to be our lowest. We're probably going to end up getting rid of our RM zone, which at this point have one parcel in the city that's zoned RM. RM is a residential manufactured housing zone. It's kind of redundant at this point. The R2 zone, the R3 zones are all of our residential zones. Our PUD standards, which allow flexible design standards, typically associated with the subdivision. Fencings and walls, because there'll be a lot of different housing types, so we have to make sure that that's cross-referenced. Parking is the big one. And that's something where there's an additional bill, because of course there is, that right now we're gonna have to review our parking standards because we do not allow stacked parking, which will not be something that we are able to do come next year or now. Are we?
What kind of park?
Stacked. So think of, one long driveway, one car parked, one car parks behind it, so it's stacked versus side by side.
Oh.
Yeah, so currently, as a standard, there are some examples in the city of stacked parking that's been allowed as through a variance process. Don's laughing. But generally speaking, we don't allow stacked parking, but now we have to per the state law. So that's something I was actually telling Heather this morning, I think it actually might help, just because it's a lot easier to facilitate when you're looking at 2D ADUs in a single family parking, so.
Well, it's gonna be a moot point, because when we're looking at, these are the things that have to change. One of them is gonna have to do with building setbacks. So
Yeah.
in order to get enough room to build all these units, the setback from the street to the front of the property will likely have to be reduced. So right now, our minimum setback's only long enough to allow for actually one car depth, which is about, it's actually 25 feet, and a car is, 18 feet. So this setback will get reduced in the future as part of the demand that we'll have to meet for the housing. And the same thing goes for looking at total coverage by the number of building footprints will get changed. We're gonna have to talk about impervious surface, so starting to talk about that driveway apron and the concrete patio, and then you have a concrete path, you know, because there's needs for drainage on site. And so we'll have to start looking at limiting that so people don't, you know, concrete their lot and then the runoff ends up in the street. So those are the kind of the nitty-gritty of the things that we're gonna be talking about over the next couple of months. And this project will be complete before the end of the year.
Buckle up.
Buckle up.
Do we not, now as a city, I'm just asking curious, as a city, you guys know, do we not want to welcome, be getting bigger, or are we trying to stay small? You talk as if we are against these, improvements or these new, changes.
So I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
I'm asking you, Airway Heights are we happy to have these changes because it's gonna bring in more people and it's gonna expand our city and create us into, another Spokane or another big city, or we're trying to stay small?
I think that's for me an agnostic question.
Sure.
Because we're simply addressing a series of new state laws. It's not really an issue, I think, of welcoming people or trying not to have people in the community. It's changing the way that we outline the city for purposes of looking at things like density, and it impacts how we address all of the services. And so we simply are going to be looking at how we're in the fabric that we have of the city. Think of it as a patchwork quilt, which is right in front of you. You know, how best to accomplish these goals, and then, you know, within some way look at community context. So here's an example. Brian today with STA was encouraging us to encourage density of housing along transit lanes, right? So we would look at that kind of information and information from other partners to look at this, basically the blue, like what will we do in the future? So that transit route right now that was being identified, it's coming down Russell, it's coming down 6th, and then it's turning down Lawson right here, right? Eventually there will be a second bus route that comes down Russell and comes all the way down 6th Avenue. So at a minimum, we have to allow for this blue area to have 3. But if we looked at STA suggestions, you know, what would we look at along this corridor along 6th Avenue or down Lawson in the future for purposes of increased density? These are the conversations that we need to engage in. We need to talk to the public about, like, how do we fit it all in? Because behind these 2 laws is going to be a housing projection, which by law we have to meet. So I guess it's really not a question of like it or don't like it. It's a series of questions about how it's going to best fit the community to fit all these puzzle pieces in and be able to serve it.
All right,
That's good. It's like asking, I guess it's like asking people, do you not want to grow? Well, that's completely outside of our control.
well, that's what I was thinking, and so it's just the route in which is sound down in explanations. So yeah, I would think that we want to welcome all the knowledge of how to do it for real. And then obviously other cities know how to do it, so.
Well,
we have no choice but to learn that.
Some of them are only months ahead of us.
Oh, well, that's good. Right?
Yeah, it is good. So I guess that if there's any concern in my voice, it's having to do with the magnitude of the project, which is what we've talked about today. It's looking fundamentally at the zoning standards. It's going to be the tie-in with all of our other requirements, such as how to connect utilities, how to address parking. And as we get a little bit deeper into this, is ultimately we're going to have to tie this into transportation,
Sure.
you know, capacity and congestion and all of that. Yeah.
That's exciting, is it not? This is hard work, sounds like.
So I've been through comp plans for quite a few years, multiple times. What we have this time is probably only similar to the very first comp plan that had to be adopted. In that it just has a significant amount of new requirements that we have to meet, and there's a relatively short period of time to do that. As a matter of fact, 2024, 2025 adopters for their comp plans have both gotten extensions from the state legislature, and there's already talks about asking the state legislature here in our county to ask for an extension too, because of the amount of work.
Good.
So it's a lot.
Yeah, I can see that. Just as a lot of people, that's coming in, you know, so it's gonna benefit. It's just a lot of work to do it. Well, that's right. We got this. Come on.
Do we? So the other piece here that I think we need to touch on is potential impact to our subdivision standards. A big piece that we've really been talking about has to do with, again, fitting all of this stuff on a typical lot, 7,200 square foot single family lot, and going back to alley access and moving that front setback a bit, because again, if you have alley access, you can have access to the backyard, so you can access both ADUs in the house. If you have two ADUs in the house, it's way easier to facilitate than the front. So that means we need to review all of our subdivision standards, look at requiring alleys again. And I think I was watching
We have never required alleys.
yeah. I was watching a meeting, Spokane County Commissioners from a few weeks ago. And I think it might have been Al French who said, who would have thought that Shadle Park was cutting edge planning? And I thought that was really funny, because it's exactly the same stuff we're looking at now. And you look at those kind of like post-World War II houses that litter the city of Spokane. They're all alley facing, and you think of them as kind of being old school, and it's like, what's old is new. So, so looking back at alleys, we haven't really seen a layout that kind of shows that yet, but that was kind of the homework for next time we talk to our consultants on that. Like, show me something with the reduced front setback with some alley access. What does that look like? How does the parking look like? Things like that. So, so yeah, we're gonna let you guys read these because it's getting late. I don't want to spend too much time, but there's a lot of things we need to look at in the subdivision code, so we're gonna spend a good time. And Heather mentioned that, for lack of a better term, subdivided lots after ADUs are built, will be built into the subdivision code as well, which is something to take care of, which. Building code obviously is going to be something that the 2021 building code came out in March 15th, right? We, and I'm pretty sure a lot of, and I don't know, I talked to our building official, but I don't think a lot of middle housing in this context was really like how that touches a building code. I don't know. So we're gonna be working with our building official on the building code. This is one I mentioned earlier, which has to do with impact fees, concurrency. How do our transportation concurrency ordinances and our transportation impact fees, park mitigation fees, and GFCs affect us? Right now, GFCs are general facility charges. Essentially, if you build a single house, you put a water meter on that, there's a general impact fee for that. You're impacting our water system. So what is it? Do you know what a GFC is for a single family? Of course you know. I don't either. That's not.
It's about $1,700 for a 3/4 inch line.
Yeah.
So the purpose of a general facility charge is to do two things. It's one, to help with the maintenance of the system. So the rates that are paid individually on a monthly basis are not enough to cover the cost of maintaining the infrastructure of a water and sewer system. And GFCs help pay for that, but it also helps build funding for the future repair or replacement of that system, because pipes age, right?
Yeah. Well, like comes to our neighborhood, I think we're already replacing water meters.
Right, right. So, there's some really specific language in the statutes, that we'll have to look at that impact a variety of fees that get charged for projects. So it doesn't mean that the cost goes away. It means that we have to think about how we allocate that and how we plan in the future for capital improvements. And one of the things, for example, is that for traffic impact fees, you can only charge 50% of the rate of a single family for an ADU. So we'll have to go through and update these rate structures in order to meet the state law requirements, but also think about kind of systematically, like how we are able to address the overall cost of the system.
Park impact fees, which are impacts to our park system, are also calculated in a single family, I believe. Single family is a certain rate, so how does that work again with multiple units on a single family lot? So this doesn't say the public works standards, but we've touched on that as well. That's really significant regarding connections as well, how we're going to handle that, as well as storm drainage. A lot more concrete goes in, creates the necessity to facilitate storm drainage a little bit differently. So that's also on here. It's actually listed, but I think this is the last one, which has to do with critical areas. Fun thing about Airway Heights is we barely have any critical areas, which is really, really nice. I actually watched a presentation from Cheney last night, and their entire UGA is in a wetland right now. And I haven't talked to you about that, but it's the map. Yeah, so.
I saw the map in the report,
Oh,
and
you saw, yeah, so they have this entire UGA, which the intent of the UGA is, we're gonna grow into this, and 90% of the land is unbuildable. So that's super fun. So everybody's got problems.
so a critical area has endangered species, or it's a migratory location. It has a river with a protected stream bank. It's a wetland. It's a steep slope, erosive soils. So imagine all the things you see in Spokane and you don't see here. So it won't affect us as much, but there are other development constraints, but for purposes of this, they just kind of threw it in with the groceries, like here's your free chiclets.
We're not too concerned about it, but it is something we do need to review. We do have wellhead protection areas that, most of those are on the south side of town anyway, though. So the areas, and unless something changes with Fairchild, which, then that's not really gonna be that impactful. Airport overlay zones, J-lists are actually big ones, because we're allowing increased density in sound contours and stuff like that, and that's a conversation we haven't had yet. About getting Fairchild and getting feedback on that. I mean, there's only so much we can do. But I don't know. I actually haven't thought about that till right now. So, but we'll see. And another moving part with that, we mentioned that the sound contours might be changing a little bit, so things might be different then anyway, but we'll hopefully have an idea of that in October.
So in summary, this was mostly just to kind of engage on the project and kind of tell you where we're starting at. Really, the next stage is the audit.
Mhm.
So it'll be a detailed analysis telling us what we're gonna have to change in our codes in order to meet these base typologies. And they're already examining the population, or excuse me, the housing allocation, so that they'll be helping us build toward that, and we can start in the next couple of meetings asking about, where in the blue is it appropriate to start thinking about something that is maybe bigger than a triplex.
Buckle up.
And there's community engagement for this project. So there'll be engagement with the public, basically when we get to some point of like understanding and defining, like we're doing right now, like defining what the requirement is and some of the options that we need to make so we can get some feedback from the public. And then it'll lead into getting feedback from the public about the blue, like all the different colors of blue, you know. Should there be more types of housing in some of those locations? So moving forward, we will also continue to be one of the fastest growing communities in the county. So a large amount of the population has been assigned to us. So our 20, what year is this? 2046 will be our planning horizon. Our population is projected to be over 16,000 and we're a little over 11 and some change right now. So basically another doubling of our population in the next 20 years.
Remember we 5 years ago? Even 2 years ago.
Yeah, we don't, I mean, we've been growing fast. And, there could be ups and downs. I mean, there's the housing recession, between 2006 and 2010. And there was, been some significant issues around COVID that affected the housing market too, so you have ups and you've got downs, but, in theory, they all kind of level out. So moving forward, are there some specific questions you'd like to have answers to or information on for next month around this housing project?
I don't have any, Heather. I trust that you'll be bringing information to us as required and needed.
We will. The other thing we'll do is we'll give them the timeline for the grant.
Yeah, we'll present a little bit next month on just, the timeline for adoption, when you should expect to have a public hearing, engagement, stuff like that. So it'll give you an idea of what the rest of the year is gonna look like.
Can we shoot questions to you over the next week or so?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, anytime. Just shoot them directly to Zach or I. Just don't do a group and I'll commission email. And we'll be prepared to answer those. So this is the starting line. Our finish line is before the end of the year, and it will be a whole package of code. And it will also be comp plan amendments.
And this will go through you as a commission. We'll do a public hearing and then it'll go to city council. So you're
The
responsible.
buck stops there.
So when we talked about density, this is the new norm is the 3. So what do you think, or what do you remember is our current density in the single family zone? How many units per acre?
I want to say 10. That seems too few. Oh, it's lower than 10? 5? 5 per acre.
What's our highest density
In our R3.
in our R3 zone?
Just our multifamily, think about.
20.
What do you think this represents?
And again, this would be our lowest.
This would become the new low density.
Well, the basic math there says 15. Well, it's where we were at 5 per acre under R1. If we put 3 housing units per single lot, that gives me 3 times 5, so it's more than 15. Huh?
It'll actually be closer to 18 to 20.
Yeah.
So
That's a lot size.
a lot will depend on the lot size. So that's why we'll end up at a comp plan at the same time with this package toward the end of the year, because we're going to have to redefine our density categories in all of our residential areas around this work.
Yeah, because if you have a standard to build on, but then if you can then carve it off and sell it down the road.
Yeah,
it's
all our codes have
lots.
defined lot coverages. The existing single family.
Oh, but that lot from 83
You
off.
know, the ones that right now is
Well, eventually, and that's what the
35%.
state requirement, and
So
they're,
you
the
can-
consultants are calling it a funky name called unit lot division, but basically the idea that
That's
by law, we have to allow those accessory dwelling units to break off. So We have, so we don't create it, but we have to create the
something we're
code that
considering.
allows,
It's on
so
the list of things
that's
we're
what's gonna happen is our,
So-
and I'm just saying this
We don't
because
have
these
to
are like little
propose
quick
changes
facts,
yet.
like this is what it means, this is what it means.
Don, you all right?
Oh, no, I mean, I've been kind of watching this ever since the bill was proposed, and it's just like, it's been crazy, because you look at it. So we're trying to come up with affordable housing and all these other things, but then you look at it, and I've heard some of the. Dream about. The investment community and how they're looking at it. Oh my gosh, there is some potentially great opportunity out there if you can get in and do these and carve them up. So you see it from all different angles of, okay, so yes, in some instances, it's going to help what they're actually going for, but then on on the flip side, these guys are gonna drive prices right back up again and and it's going to defeat or not even really help. What the initial intent was, so. And then there's stuff in the middle of, it's gonna help, it's, public safety and all that if. The tighter density, so they don't have to go as far, but, there's just a
I
lot.
know that their calls to service might go up for just people.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and that's when we get in so in the following year after that, when we're working on the comp plan year and a half, that's when we really get into the details about.
Yeah.
How it affects level of service across the board, but it's at 8:30, and so I just want to kind of give you a game plan for essentially the next 7 months.
Nice.
And this is, and we'll be working closely with you on this.
And again, this is one of 3 projects, so. Hang on.
When's the initial survey supposed to be done? Or they,
The audit,
or off?
they've already completed, essentially, preliminary one today. Looking at a standard lot, a 6,000 square foot and a 7,200 square foot lot. And they've been able to demonstrate that we can actually do it. With these housing types, the triplex, the ADUs, the stacked flats, and the cottage housing. So they'll continue to do some work, including what Zach asked about, which is moving forward, looking at a new type of lot, which is one that has an alley as a requirement. And so we'll see that. So by your next meeting, you'll get to see the at least the visual version of the audit showing how it all lays out on a lot. And so they're already getting an idea of what we need to do with setbacks, building coverage, total site coverage, building height, parking. So they're working really fast because it is a fast timeline on the project.
And they do have, like, what we mentioned Snohomish, but they've worked on a couple other projects too, so that was one of the reasons why we
I was
selected.
gonna say, it's great picking somebody that, since they've already been through this and so.
Well, and it's good, they're passionate about it too, which is really nice because we've, worked with people who don't necessarily have that passion, but this is something you can tell they're really motivated on, and so far it's been fantastic.
Well, it's nice to see. Yeah.
So at the next meeting, you'll get an update on the housing, and then we'll have our first meeting on the progress around the climate, sustainability, and greenhouse gas emission reduction work.
That's the other project.
That's one of the other projects, yeah. Yes.
We mean.
It's
Let's not
fair,
forget that.
sure. But we'll do what we gotta do, first thing.
So it's really important, what we hope, and this is a conversation, and Mark remembers this, which is hang in there with us for the 2 years. And Mark remembers a day when meetings were canceled all the time and there wasn't really anything talked about.
For real, yeah.
Not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen. So it would be really helpful, as we work through this, to be at the meetings and ask questions and stay with us for the duration of.
Well, I'll say it like every time, I'd much rather be doing work than having nothing to do. And I appreciate everything you all do for the city. You guys just the amount of work that we get done, is very appreciative.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to you, Mark. That was all of our items on the missing middle.
Great. Well, if nobody else has anything, I will go ahead and close this up. After we turn the recording off, I want to ask a real quick question, if you don't mind, Heather.
Sure.
Let's
Absolutely.
Let's end this meeting at 8:34. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.